Hello, this is Mark Archambault. I'm here to read you a teaser chapter. It's chapter 1 of my new upcoming book, the Sabertooth Chronicles, which is about a young 13-year-old boy who wakes up at the end of the last ice age among Stone Age peoples and has to deal with all the adventures that come his way. I expect to have the book ready in about February of 2010. So let's get going. Chapter 1. Cody blinked his eyes repeatedly. His vision was cloudy, and he could only make out orange flickering light. A fire, he decided as he smelled the burning wood. Man, what a headache! He tried weakly to sit up, but as he placed some weight on his left arm, a burning pain shot through his shoulder and chest. What the? Cody blinked some more. His vision cleared slightly. He tilted his head and looked at his shoulder and chest. His shirt was off, he was dirty, and there were clumps of wet moss stuck to his shoulder and chest. He reached over with his right hand and gently lifted a corner of the moss. Deep gouges slowly seeped blood. A wave of nausea rolled over Cody, and his head fell back against the furry pelt it had been resting on. He took a deep breath to steady himself. Cody's thoughts swarmed. He couldn't remember, well, anything really. After another few deep breaths, he raised himself on his right elbow, careful not to move his injured left arm. His vision was clear now, and he took in his surroundings. A small fire glowed beside him. He was lying on animal pelts, and another furry pelt covered him. Bearskin? The ground was compacted dirt. At the edge of the fire's light, he could make out rough stone walls. A cave. He turned. Near another wall were what looked like stone-tipped spears. On the ground were mounds of animal pelts, some shaggy, some furry, some leather-like. A few large animal bones were heaped off to one side, and next to them a pair of enormous tusks. Elephant tusks? As he turned, he felt something move against his chest. Looking down, he saw the largest canine tooth he had ever seen hanging from his neck by a leather thong. He sat up and lifted the huge tooth so he could see it better. He'd seen a tiger yawn from pretty close up at the San Diego Zoo. This looked a lot like the tiger's teeth, but probably 3 times as big. And it had some weird markings etched on it. Maybe a sun, some other crisscrossed lines. There was something familiar about it. He remembered something, or knew he should remember something, like a word on the tip of his tongue. He closed his fist around the massive canine and tapped its tip against his forehead. A nervous habit he often performed with the clicking end of a pen in math class, much to Miss Huberman's annoyance. With each tap, he remembered a little more. He tapped his tooth to his forehead before, and something had happened. He'd been at his father's ranch. He'd been... Look, Cody, I'm sorry you won't be spending your birthday in San Diego with your friends, but it wasn't my decision. Cody's dad turned down the car stereo and looked over at his son. Cody looked back, his teeth clenched and a lump in his throat. I know, Dad, it's hard, you know. Cody sighed and looked away. He didn't want his dad to see the tears forming in the corners of his eyes. He looked out the window of the SUV at the plains rolling all the way to the horizon. In the distance, he could make out the swift, moving form of a deer leaping through the tall grasses. He felt his dad's hand on his shoulder and looked back at him. We'll make the best of it, Cody. You'll have a good time, I promise. Misty had a new colt you'll want to meet. We call him Phoenix because he nearly died when he was born, and then he just sort of sprang to life. He's thriving now. That's cool, I guess, Cody replied noncommittally. But what about Bareface? Bareface was his dad's aptly named dog. He's still around causing trouble, same as usual. His dad paused. Listen, I was thinking we could maybe take a few days and go hiking in the hills on the western edge of the ranch. Danny swears he saw some old arrowheads in a gully up that way when he stopped to water his horse on a cattle run. He didn't have time to search around much, but you and I could explore it. We'll saddle up Misty and Harebrain, pack some gear, and just have a few days to ourselves. How does that sound? Cody smiled at his dad. Sounds pretty good. But you gonna make a cake on a campfire? Cody's dad laughed, the crow's feet around his eyes crinkling in delight. I'll tell you what, Cody. I'll make some bannock with blueberry jam and we'll stick 13 candles in it. Deal? Deal. As he shut the door of the SUV, Cody wasn't at all surprised that Bareface was the first to greet them. The large Rottweiler Shepherd Cross bounded up to him, his tongue lolling from his grinning mouth and his rope-thick tail pounding rhythmically against the vehicle's tire. "Hey there, ugly," Cody said happily, patting the dog on its large head. Bareface responded by sitting and putting a paw on Cody's knee. "Good to see you, too." Cody fished a piece of beef jerky from his pocket and tossed it in the air. Bareface leaped and snatched it, then trotted away and plunked down to gnaw at the stringy meat. "I'll bring your bags in, Cody. Why don't you head over to the stables and get acquainted with Phoenix? I'll meet you there in a bit." "Okay, Dad." Phoenix pranced around his stall, throwing his head and neighing. He was gray-brown with a white triangle on his forehead. Cody watched him as he stroked the colt's mother, Misty. "He's beautiful, Misty. You must be proud of having such a handsome son." The horse snorted softly and rested her charcoal black head on Cody's shoulder. "I missed you too, girl," said Cody, scratching her behind the ear. "I just called your mom to let her know we made it safe," his father said from the door as he walked in. He grabbed a brush and started grooming Hairbrain, the older gelding. The horse snorted and began chewing on the man's collar. "Cut that out, Hairbrain!" Cody chuckled. "He hasn't changed a bit." "Never. The brattiest horse I've ever met." "So, did Mom have anything to say?" "She told me to make sure you have a good birthday, and to tell you she's really sorry she couldn't throw you a party and keep you in San Diego until afterwards, like usual. You know, this new project she's working on is very important. I know," Cody interrupted. "I've heard it before. I already had plans to hang out with my friends, you know. I'm sure we'll have fun anyway. Say, did you get that satellite internet connection you were talking about?" "Sorry, no. Still just dial-up." "Cell phone?" "Nope. But you can use the landline to call your friends." "Yeah, I guess. Will Phoenix be okay without Misty for a few days?" "Danny will look after him. I've got another ranch hand on this summer too, so no worries." "When are we leaving?" "Day after tomorrow. I figure we'll take some time to rest up. I've got to check on a few things around here. You should probably practice riding for a bit." "What? You think I need practice? I was riding before I could walk, Dad." "Whatever you say, Code. Just thought you might be getting too citified and beach bummed and all. Horses aren't like surfboards, you know." "Beach bummed? Where do you come up with this stuff, Dad?" "Go get ready for supper, smart aleck." Cody spent most of the following day on Misty's back. She'd been his horse for several years now, ever since his parents had split up. He'd spent part of every summer here at his dad's ranch in Montana, and sometimes a week or two here and there in the winter too. This is where he'd grown up, but he spent the school year in San Diego with his mom. Every time he was back, he rode Misty. The horse knew him well. He only had to think what he wanted her to do, and she seemed to respond to him even before he tugged on the reins. Cody sighed and looked over the foothills toward the Rockies silhouetted in the distance. "Let it go," he thought to himself. "You're here, make the best of it. You can survive a few months without being constantly in contact with your friends. This is home too. Ready, girl?" His heels barely touched her sides, and the horse burst forward. "Yeah!" Cody shouted, urging her faster. All his cares were forgotten in the rush of wind through his blonde hair, and the thunder of Misty's hooves pounding the prairie. "Good ride?" asked Danny. He set a plate of barbecued steaks on the table and sat down. Cody skewed a steak with his fork and plopped it on his plate, beside the roasted potatoes and salad. His dad had insisted on the salad. "Yeah, good ride. Misty's in good shape. Thanks for taking care of her." "You bet. So you two heading out tomorrow, Ted?" "First light," responded Cody's dad around a mouthful of steak. Cody groaned. He hated getting up that early. "Don't worry, Cody. I'll make sure you get up on time." Danny grinned. "That's what I'm worried about," joked Cody. "You know where you're going?" "I think so." Cody's dad gestured at the table as if it were a map. "The spot you talked about is where that creek crosses the ranch's boundary, isn't it? Up near Old Crow's cabin?" "Around there. It was a few hundred yards on this side of the fence line, if I recall." They finished the meal over talk of business of running the ranch. A few years back, they had started raising bison and elk in addition to the cattle. As Danny was telling Cody about how they'd started learning to carve the elk antlers they'd collected, Cody's daddy went to the kitchen. He returned with a cake, topped with an icing drawing of a horse riding a surfboard, and ringed by 13 candles.